Thank you, everybody, for your time today. As you probably have heard, the College Board has released elements of what the changes will be on the redesigned SAT. We applaud the College Board's effort to align the test to the high school curricula, and in so doing, there will be many changes. 16. Now, have no fear, though, because what we offer here and what we do is we will guide you through any test change for any standardized test, because our expertise in dealing with these types of tests is unparalleled. And so at the end of the day, just because a test is changing doesn't mean that necessarily things will need to be overhauled or revamped. What we know is that any test that requires multiple choice answers is in fact a standardized test, and in so doing is a very coachable test. And so therefore, while you will need some tools that you learned in the classroom, what we are here today to do is to give you a sampling of how we can help you apply those techniques or content that you have learned in school on the redesigned SAT. Now, you might be thinking, how am I supposed to get a good score on this test? And it's going to be certainly familiarizing yourself with the content of the test, with the structure of the test, and that is what we will be doing for our students in our courses. Because the best way to beat the test is to know the test. And why should we even beat the test to begin with? Well, in order to get to the school that you want and to the college that you want, we will certainly have to hit a score that's within the 25th to 75th percentile for that school. Now, good SAT scores, whatever that might be, a good SAT score for us is defined as a score that will get you into the school that is the best fit for you. And so therefore, we have many guidebooks that we publish that can give you lots of information to help you figure out which school might be the best fit. And not only acceptance letters, though, is our goal, but we are very interested in helping you get your target SAT score to help you get scholarships. Because money is awesome, right? Think about it. How awesome would it be to not just get acceptance letters, but to also get scholarship offers? So in essence, a college is actually paying you to go to its school. How cool is that, right? So you are not just going to get a world-class education wherever you go. You're actually going to get money to sit in class, pay attention, and learn things to better yourself for your career. And so applying yourself in this time during a high school career to get as good of an SAT score as you can will be very, very advantageous to you. And we at the Princeton Review are here to help you get there. Our expertise and your goals together, we will get you to the school that you want and hopefully as many scholarship offers as we can. And so in order to get there down the line, let's start at square one. Let's talk about the redesigned SAT. Let's look at a sampling of some of the problems that are on this redesigned SAT. And while you may have done your research already and have figured out or have seen how there are so many changes, right? The score is changing from a 2400 to a 1600. The essay is optional now. It's no longer going to be section 1 of the SAT, right? How much did you love writing a 2-page essay at 8:20, around 8:20 on a Saturday morning, right? That accounted for approximately 30% of your overall writing score. And so there are many changes, but we will, in this very brief time, boil it down to 3 categories. All right. So the first category is going to be same. Second category is going to be similar. The third category is going to be different. And so let me go through each of those and what they actually mean. So in the first bucket, when we say same, what we're actually talking about is not necessarily the same content, but where a new question on the redesigned SAT may appear somewhere else on an already existing test. You may have heard a lot that the redesigned SAT looks a lot like the ACT, and we will see some evidence of that. So when we see the same, it's not necessarily the same in terms of does a redesigned SAT match up to the current SAT, but have we seen that in any space on any standardized test? And so therefore, we will look at some problems like that. Secondarily, we will look at similar, in which, well, you may have seen types of problems like this before, in which the content might be tested, or that you've seen many times in school, and maybe on a standardized test, but the presentation of the problem might be a little bit different. And so therefore, we will kind of strip away that kind of air of mystery and say, hey, this really is just a kind of the same types of problems that you have already seen. And when you apply very effective and very efficient Princeton review techniques and strategies to these problems, you will not only get an answer, but you will get the correct answer, and you will feel confident that you got the right answer. And so, thirdly, we'll have the difference, and these are going to be the problem types that are new completely to the standardized test space, at least with regards to the ACT, the current SAT, or the redesigned SAT. So we will go through those in this PowerPoint presentation of some sample problems that the College Board has released on April 16th. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. And so right now you should be able to see the first screen, which would be the redesigned SAT. This is our cover slide, and so we'll launch right into it. So when we actually go and look at our first bucket of the same, what we're looking at is basically, well, on the ACT, this would be part of the ACT English test, and this is when they would have a long passage and they would underline certain portions, and the questions with 4 answer choices would ask you which of the following would be the best grammatical replacement, if you need to change it at all, to be correct in the sentence. And so on the redesigned SAT, we now see not independent improving sentence questions anymore, but we see these grammar corrections embedded inside passages. And so therefore, while this may look new, but it is literally the same as what students who may have taken the ACT English have seen before. And so let's actually go through this sample SAT writing and language test problem, as it is now called, on the next slide, and see how a Princeton Review student would actually tackle this. And so when we come across number 1, the sentence reads, when any one of these changes occur, it is likely the result of careful analysis conducted by transportation planners. All right, so the first thing that should pop into your mind, into a Princeton Review student's mind, is, do you spot an error? Because in this particular case, when you identify what parts of speech, or kind of what's going on in the underlined portion, we kind of want to not go by what you hear might be wrong, but what you see is wrong. And in this particular case, we see that the verb that's circled here is occur. And since this is going to be the present tense form of the verb, we know that plural verbs do not have S's. So occur is plural. And so any verb must have a subject to go with that verb. And when we look at the subject of one, one is a singular pronoun. And so singular pronouns do not agree with plural verbs. And so therefore, we spotted the error and can confidently cross off answer choice A as well as answer choice B because it contains occur as well. And so therefore, when we look at the remaining answer choices here, we see that they is in answer choice C and it is in answer choice D. And so they is a plural pronoun and it is a singular pronoun. And because we're dealing with any one of these changes, a singular entity, we can confidently cross off answer choice C and select answer choice D as our right answer. And so therefore, notice how many times I read the sentence in its entirety. Right? I only read it once. And when I did so, it was so that I could see if I could potentially spot the error. And by following a specific protocol, our students will be able to attack these types of problems without needing to read the sentence 4 times and plugging in each answer choice in to the underlined portion to kind of see what sounds the best. And so therefore, this is a very effective and efficient method to attack this writing and language test problem on the redesigned SAT. Moving on to number 2, we see that the underlined portion is they design. And so let's read the sentence from the very beginning. The work of transportation planners generally includes evaluating current transportation needs, assessing the effectiveness of existing facilities, and improving those facilities, or they design new ones. So here, because we kind of have a list going on, right? And so we have evaluating, assessing, and improving, then we need something along those lines to be parallel in form. We need the verbs to match what all the other verbs that are in this list. So because we have evaluating and assessing and improving, we know that this verb here must be designing. And so that's why I can confidently cross off answer choices A, B, and D, and select answer choice C as my right answer, designing. So here we spotted the error because we see this verb here at the very end that's part of a list, and it didn't match up to all the other verbs that were part of that list. And so therefore, we've identified the category of parallelism and selected the right answer by knowing that. And so finally, by moving on to answer choice, number 3, let's read this sentence. If analysis of the traffic count indicates that there is more traffic than the current road as it is designed at this time can efficiently accommodate, the transportation planner might recommend widening the road to another lane. So do you spot an error? So in this case, it kind of sounds good, maybe, right? But what we see here is that in current would mean right now, in today's time. But we also then have the words at this time as well. And so I've circled both of these words because, well, if you say one of them, do you really need to say the other? And so good English is also not just going to be correct English, but also going to be efficient English. So can you say the same? Can you say what you need to say in as efficient a way as possible without repeating yourself? And so therefore, the current and at this time are redundant phrases. And so therefore, I would cross off any answer choice that contains both of these terms. And so therefore, we can certainly cross off answer choice A as well as answer choice B, which would have current and right now. Notice how it doesn't have exactly at this time, but the phrase right now certainly indicates in this moment in time. And then answer choice C we cross off as well because of now currently, the redundant issue there. And so we then have answer choice D as our right answer. And so all of these categories are being tested already in the current SAT, just in a different format, but this is the same presentation as what you would see on the ACT English. So that's why this is in our same bucket here. So it is new to the redesigned SAT, but certainly something that our students have learned, have seen, have learned how to attack, and more importantly, how to get them right and know that they get them right in order to get a higher score. And so let's move on to the next bucket then. So we have the similar bucket here. Do we have any questions at this point? Excellent. So let's go on to the similar bucket. And in this bucket, we have content that may look the same, but on the redesigned SAT, it's actually going to be presented differently to us. So an example of this would be on the current SAT, you might be given a problem, a very straightforward problem such as this. If 3x times the quantity x plus 5 is equal to 0, what is one possible value of x? So there could be answer choices given to you, there may not be, and so we would then just pencil meets paper, we start crunching through solving these problems like that, right? But on the redesigned SAT, we're not saying that all of the problems will look like this, but this is going to be a newer element to the redesigned SAT, is they can give you an algebraic problem looking like this, but instead of solving for x, there's going to be an accompanying kind of a real-life application of this equation. And in this particular equation, we have a niece needs to complete a printing job using both of the printers in her office. One of the printers is twice as fast as the other, and together, the printers can complete the job in 5 hours. The equation above represents the situation described. Which of the following describes what the expression 1 over x represents in this equation? Right? So we can all imagine making printers. Right? We might have a friend named Denise. We have one printer that may be more recent, or may have just gotten upgraded, or it's just gotten fixed. So it works twice as fast as the other one. And so this mathematical equation represents this real-life application. But what are we supposed to do with this, right? And so working on this problem, what our students would do is, first of all, we like to RTFQ, which stands for read the full question, right? Because in order to get the right answer, we're going to have to know what the question actually gives us and what it's actually asking of us. So in this question, we see that one of the hot words here is that one of the printers is twice as fast as the other, and together the printers can complete the job. And so if they're working together, that's probably why we have this plus sign right here, right? Because if they're working singularly, we would only have one term by itself. Either one, doesn't really matter. But we know that one is working twice as fast, so this will probably also mean, and we'll deal with that actually down the line. But working off this hardware working together, we will then know kind of, well, both this expression on the left side represents two printers. So because of that, I can actually cross off and answer choice A, because that word answer choice has the word alone. And so what does the question actually ask us to do, though? How do I know it can cross off answer choice A because of the word alone? Well, this question asks us again, what does this, not to solve for x, but what is the term 1 over x in that expression on the left? What does that stand for? So this expression here would not be how much time it takes for the printer to print the job alone, because that's just going to be in relation to the faster printer. And once I just actually said the faster printer, that would be this 2 over x because it has a higher numerator here. I can actually cross off answer choice C as well, because we know that this 1 over x term is actually going to be representing now the slower printer, because they have the same denominator and because the numerator in this term is double that of the first fraction. And so once answer choices A and C are gone, let's look at the remaining answer choices. B has the portion of the job that the slower printer would complete in 1 hour, and answer choice D has the time that it takes a slower printer to complete 1/5 of the printing job. So notice how the question here was actually giving us that this equation tells us how, or it represents the printers working together and what they can complete. In this case, they complete the job in 5 hours. So it's all about time. Notice how this is not about the content or the extent of their completion rates. And so therefore, the main difference between answer choices B and D is that B is talking about time, how the portion of the job that the slower printer would complete in 1 hour, whereas answer choice D is talking about 1/5 of the job. So just because the time is 1/5 of the total 5 hours, that doesn't necessarily mean that 1/5 of the job would also be done, right? So therefore, think about it as if you can read 1 page in a book in 1 minute, right? Now, certainly this is when we're all full of energy, right? Because sometimes our eyes might kind of glaze over when we're reading a less interesting page than any other page in the book. If you're reading 60 pages in a book and you're reading at 1 page per minute, you're supposed to be reading at, well, 1/60th of the time, right? So, but does that necessarily mean if I were to read 120 or 100 or 300 pages, does the rate of completion, the time that it takes you to finish something, necessarily mean that you're going to also finish that same fraction of the entire project? That's not necessarily true all the time, and so that's why, bringing it back to this problem, we can cross off answer choice D. And so the right answer is answer choice B here. By our understanding of fundamental terms of how we can translate English into math, by recognizing that fractions that have similar or the same denominators, we can compare the numerators and what this 1/5 actually means, and we know what it means because the problem gave us 5 hours in the context of the problem. So this was a more laborious problem than if we refer back to the previous slide of simply solving for x. This one required kind of a more layered thinking here, right? We couldn't just solve for x. We couldn't necessarily just use our calculator, because really, how helpful would the calculator be here, right? We have to understand what each of these terms means. And so therefore, this is an example of a new question type, but presenting the same content here to you, and that's why we call that our similar bucket. And so moving on from the math, we also have a similar situation in the reading. And so the reading test on the redesigned SAT will now involve some sort of graphics. Not everywhere, but it certainly could be there. So right now on the current version of the SAT, there are going to be passages as you see up top. But now in the redesigned SAT, there could be passages that have graphic representations that will help substantiate the information that is given, or to support the information that is given in the passage. So looking more closely at this portion of the reading test on the redesigned SAT, let's actually pour through this. So the question that we'll be referring to this particular section here would be, it can be reasonably inferred from the passage and graphic that if scientists adjusted the coils to reverse the magnetic field simulating that in the East Atlantic Cape Verde Islands, the hatchlings would most likely swim in which direction? So in this particular case, we see that the title of this graphic is Orientation of Hatching hatchling loggerheads tested in magnetic fields. Wow, wasn't each one of these words mentioned in the problem? Right? And so therefore, let's RTFQ this problem. We're looking at the East Atlantic, and so therefore, well, the left graphic is the West Atlantic. I don't care about that for this question. And so therefore, we're looking at the right graphic here, the East Atlantic. So by picking apart the question, we now know for sure what we're trying to, what we will be investigating. But what are we supposed to do with that graphic on the East Atlantic? Let's actually dig a little bit deeper into the question. And what we're doing to the coils, or what the scientists are doing to the coils, they are reversing the magnetic field. And because the term magnetic fields was in the title here, we can reasonably infer that the directions of these arrows have something to do with the magnetic fields. So I may not know how or why this arrow is pointed in the direction that it is, but if we were to reverse this, reverse would mean, well, let's simply, as we all do in driver's ed, right? We learn to drive, but we also learn to reverse and we look backwards. So let's go backwards from the arrow that is given to us in this problem. And so when I draw that in, I would have something representing this. And in what direction is that? Well, let's look at the answer choices to see what we're trying to find. And in this case, we're looking for a general compass direction. And if we're going to the upper right, that would certainly be going or moving in the northeast direction. And so this might be a little bit scary. You might think that there are graphics in the reading comprehension, and that may be true, because how often might we read about hatchling loggerheads and how they're being tested in magnetic fields? Well, in this case, what we simply did was break down the question for the key terms, related them to the graphic, and then worked on that graphic itself to get what we needed, and we matched up the answer choice correctly, and we know we got it right. So this, for all you guys who might have taken the ACT, doesn't this sound or look kind of eerily similar to something that you might have seen on that test? Right? And for those people who have said ACT Science, you are absolutely right. And so on the redesigned SAT reading, there will be elements of what we might think of what you might have seen before on the ACT Science. And for those who have taken the ACT Science test before, you certainly know that you don't necessarily need to be a scientific expert. You just need to be able to interpret the data in some sort of logical fashion and attack the questions using that data. This is certainly another example of that, and that's why we call it similar, because it is now combining different things. It's still testing inferencing and reasoning capabilities, but now it's just in a different way for the reading test on the redesigned SAT. So now, there are many other examples of how things may be in the same bucket that we did way in the previous slides, and some in the similar bucket here as well. And so this is by no means a comprehensive, but we wanted to take this opportunity to show you what some of these changes were, and more importantly, how Princeton Review students would attack these, again, both very effectively and very efficiently. So now when we move on to the different bucket, perhaps the biggest difference now in this test is the fact that the essay that used to be required and was always section 1 of the current SAT, right? And so we would always have to write a 2-page essay that we would have to start writing around 8:30 in the morning on a Saturday or a Sunday, no less, right? So, oh my goodness. Or if we were taking it in school, do we really want to write a 2-page essay that's timed as the first thing we do in the day, right? And so therefore, that's certainly not going to be advantageous to us. And so therefore, what makes this completely different now on the redesigned SAT is that it is now optional. And on top of that, it will be the final thing that you do if you elect to do that. And so colleges will certainly let us know, and we will certainly pass that information on to you as soon as we get it, whether they will require the essay on the redesigned SAT or not. But certainly, knowing how to attack this essay, if you do need to take it, is going to be very critical in order to get a good score to help boost your overall SAT score, so that colleges can kind of use it to get a better idea of how good of a writer you are. And why is this essay different? Well, when we look at this slide here, the question now asks us, well, as you read the passage below, and I've included just the beginning portions of this entire passage, The question asks us to consider how Paul Bogart uses evidence, reasoning, and stylistic or persuasive elements. So you might have heard this in English class about how we're analyzing an author's persuasive argument on an issue, and how persuasive is it, right? If it is persuasive, what makes it persuasive? So we have to understand what literary devices are. We have to understand how a good structured argument is constructed, and in order to know that, well, we would actually be able to read a variety of passages or expose ourselves to lots of varieties of passages so that we can kind of see what makes an argument more persuasive or more effective than others. And once we've read that passage, we are then tasked with writing an essay, as you see here at the bottom of the slide, write an essay in which you explain how Paul Bogart builds an argument to persuade his audience that natural darkness should be preserved. Why should we preserve natural darkness, according to Paul Bogart? What makes his argument persuasive or not, right? And so therefore, our ability to assess this essay, and we certainly will be assessed in 3 different categories. It will be by our reading of the passage that's given to us, by our analysis of the passage that is given to us, and certainly of our writing skills in which we construct this essay, and how good is our grammar when we build this essay out. And so these 3 phases of the redesigned SAT's optional essay is completely different from what has been done before, either on the required essay of the current SAT or on the optional essay on the current ACT. And so this is certainly of the different bucket, and so Princeton Review students will certainly have a methodology just like any other section or test on the redesigned SAT. And by knowing that recipe of how to effectively address all the issues that the College Board wants us to do on these essays, they'll be able to write an essay without that stress of being timed. By accomplishing task after task, by following that recipe, they're going to get a good score on this essay. And so overall, I hope I've been able to, through these very brief slides, show you that we here at the Princeton Review view today as an incredible opportunity. Any standardized test is a coachable test, and our expertise on the SAT, on the ACT, on any test that is standardized will carry over very seamlessly into the redesigned SAT. Again, we applaud the College Board's effort to align this test with high school curricula and Common Core standards. We still believe that at the end of the day, that any test change, we are the experts at delivering that message to you, the student, to you, the test taker, of this high-stakes test, to make it very relatable, and by doing so, very beatable. Again, it's going to be your goals, and by letting us know what your goals are, we will use our expertise to help you get into the school that's the best fit for you. We look forward to the opportunity to work with you. We're very excited to hear the Princeton Review about this new test, and we're of the redesigned SAT, and we look forward to the opportunity to one day see you in our classrooms or in our tutorials. Thank you for your time, everybody.